Hello, my name is Hugo Prévost. Welcome to episode number 40 of Entretiens, journalistiques, a podcast about media where we talk with interesting people working in journalism and other related fields of work. You can, of course, hear that today we have an English-speaking guest. But before we start, I want to apologize once again for the noise. It seems like death and taxes, you cannot escape construction in Montreal. That being said, I'm very glad today to be joined by Oliver Sachgau, live from Munich in Germany. Hello, Oliver.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being there. Oliver, you're a journalist for Bloomberg, and you're more specifically, covering BMW and Siemens. But before we talk about your current job, I want to talk a bit about your past. You went to Carleton University in Ottawa, and after that, you worked for the Winnipeg Free Press and Toronto Star. Am I correct?
That's right, yeah. I also did 3 months as a summer intern at the Globe and Mail between that, but yeah, you pretty much have everything there.
I see. And what was the first push that led you to journalism?
You know, it was very random. I was kind of a middle performing student in high school. Like, my grades were fine, but I didn't have any specific passions or anything. And when it came time to apply for university, I knew that me and my family, we couldn't really afford to send me far away anywhere. So it was the choice was between Université d'Ottawa and Carleton University, and the application process lets you choose 3 different programs. So I think, and that's the kind of the base price. So I picked journalism, music, and IT completely at random. And the journalism program was the first one that let me in. So I said, "Yeah, sure, let's do this."
Well, that's one way to do it.
Yeah.
Of course. And so, like you said, you went through Winnipeg Free Press, Toronto Star, Globe and Mail, and then you got an offer for a very big media corporation. Why choose to go with Bloomberg?
Yeah, so it's also an interesting story. So I was at the Toronto Star 2015 to 2016, and in July of 2016, there was a huge shooting in Munich. One of the only ones. It's a pretty quiet city, so this was just really worldwide news. And I basically did what I do as a journalist. I jumped on Twitter and started looking at all the clips that were coming on social media, and started translating them because I speak German. Both of my parents are German, so it was pretty easy for me to get in there. And I started calling old school friends and stuff. And so I was reporting for the paper, but of course, like every journalist, I was tweeting a lot too. And that got the attention of some people. And Bloomberg at the time was looking for a reporter in Munich. And I still had my German passport. So they reached out to me and I applied. And then I think it was like 8 weeks later and 6 job interviews later. And suddenly it was time to pack my bags.
Wow, that's pretty quick.
Yeah, it was a huge. I mean, at the end of the day, I was looking for a job anywhere. I would have gone basically anywhere for a journalism job, and as you probably know, they're very few and far in between, and they were back then as well. So this was the first job to say yes to me, and I wasn't going to say no to something like this.
Well, that's a pretty big step, in a young career. I mean, you start in journalism, and then bam, you're working for Bloomberg.
Yeah, I always feel like I skipped 2 or 3 steps there. A lot of the people I did the Toronto Star year-long with, many of whom I consider to be much better journalists than me, they're, not all of them are in journalism anymore, and some of them are at local papers, some of them are, at the CBC in regional outlets. We're all trying our best, but I think I'm just the one who got lucky, I think.
And did you have to learn specific ways in order to be a business journalist, or did you already do some similar stuff in your previous jobs?
Yeah, so I specialized in business journalism in university, so I took a whole course on that. And then at the Toronto Star, I did 2 or 3 months at the business desk, which is they let the 1-year interns there rotate through different assignment desks. And that was really useful, actually, even though it was much more consumer focused. So I had a basis of understanding. Of course, Bloomberg is much more, pure finance business. So there was a learning curve there. And then there's, of course, the Bloomberg terminal, which is the system we use for everything and that the clients use as well. And that, of course, I had to learn from scratch.
Oh, so it's I knew there's a specific piece of equipment for traders and so on, but I didn't know there was something specific also for journalists.
Yeah, the whole thing is one program, and it contains not only tools for traders, but for analysts. And then there's, hundreds of internal tools from a CMS for the journalists. We have TV tools for producers, for the coders. There's a whole development environment there. Like it's everybody uses the same one program, and everybody works in the same one system, including the journalists.
And you said you already knew German, of course, but were you rusty a little bit, or were you already good to go?
Oh, I was incredibly rusty. It was, and I didn't even know it because I spoke German at home with my parents, and that was the extent of my German. I didn't really have German friends in Canada, but I felt like I was fine. I could do my weekly or whatever phone call with my parents and tell them, yeah, I'm eating, and yeah, I'm doing fine, and no, I don't need money, and that's about the conversations you have with your parents. That's what I did in German, and then I came here, and suddenly it became time to ask companies about their profit margins and write long emails about interview requests, and I had never done that in that language, and even though it's somewhere in the back of my head those words existed, they just took forever to get out, and it took at least a year for me to feel comfortable doing that, and still now if I write an email in German, I'll often write it, and then I'll give up and write the English one in Google Translate and translate it into German, and then just correct the little mistakes. Like it's still there's still a little bit of a block there for sure.
Because you work in English, articles are in English and so on, but did they ever ask you to completely write an article, for example, in German, or did they tell you to just stick to English?
No, so I write only in English. I do my interviews in German sometimes, and then I'll translate the quotes into English. We do have a German language team here, but and they do some original reporting, but that's a separate team, and they often translate my articles back into German if I have a large story that day.
I see. We usually talk about the relationship between companies and politicians, so on, with the media from in the US and Canada, maybe a bit in Europe, but we don't really talk about what is it to work as a journalist in Germany. How are people friendly? Is there a feeling of, I don't want to say unease, but we see, for example, in Canada and the US, once again, there's a large movement of distrust towards the media. Is it the same thing over there?
I think it's roughly, there's a little bit of that in this country. I mean, everybody, especially young Germans, there's this wave of kind of media skepticism that I think you see everywhere. Much more common with the companies, and I don't think this is just a German problem, but it is very common in Germany, is practices like quote approval, or companies will ask to see an article before you publish it.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, you can't do that as an Anglo-Saxon media company. And even some German media companies don't do that. But the companies, for them, it's a very normal thing to ask. They don't feel bad about asking it. They don't think they're overstepping. And I have to explain to them that just culturally, coming from Canada, that's not a thing. That's not a thing we do, and it's not a thing that we really even do at this company.
I see. This is because I knew about, for example, in Japan, this is a thing that they do a lot, but I didn't know it happened too in Germany. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and they're very friendly about it. Even just a easy interview, they say like, "Listen, can we just check the quotes you're going to use?" And they say it's for accuracy reasons or things like that.
Yeah.
And then I usually have to tell them like, I can't do that. But there's always a way to talk with them. You say, "Listen, I'll have a conversation with you, and I'll tell you like what like give you a better idea of the story I'm writing and what parts of the conversation were interesting to me." And you can usually set them at ease. They know you're not usually there to catch them if they slipped up in some word or something. That's not really what we do most of the time.
Okay. And there's no frustration from their end, saying that they cannot have what they want to have, basically.
Usually there isn't. Yeah.
Okay, that's a good thing. I know. Well, cannot escape it. We're going to talk about the pandemic and the effect it had on you and your work. But is there, pandemic aside, end of the world aside, is there a typical day for you at Bloomberg? How does it work exactly?
The days are very varied. I mean, I used to travel a lot more before the pandemic. Go to a lot of different events, press conferences,
Hmm.
meet sources, things like that. The companies that I cover are big companies, and they have locations everywhere. Siemens has a large presence in Berlin, and there's always auto shows, trade fairs. So often you'd be traveling. You as a wire journalist, you often you're always kind of plugged into the system. You're always looking at your alerts, checking if there's any news you missed that you have to write up, even if it's something small, and keeping on top of the breaking news. And then any other time you basically spend developing sources, meeting with people, trying to get information for exclusive stories, basically.
Hmm.
4 times a year as a business journalist, you go into earnings season, which is, the quarterly earnings results happen. And then for a few days, or depending on the season, a week or two, you're basically coming into the office at 6 a.m., 6:30, 7 a.m., sometimes 5:45, in
Wow.
order because the company will release their quarterly earnings at that
Hmm.
time. So you have to be ready for that.
Wow, that's still a little bit early. 5:45.
It never gets easier. You
Mhm.
always think you'll go to bed at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. and then you don't, and you just kind
Yeah,
of have to muscle through the next day.
yeah. I mean, I also work at Radio Canada in Montreal, and there's a shift, an early shift for the web desk, and I usually take a sleeping pill because I cannot do it otherwise. I'm used
Yeah,
to
yeah,
go
I
to
can
sleep
imagine.
around midnight, and then if I have to get up really early, I'm going to bed at 10 maybe, and yeah, take a sleeping pill to be able to to sleep well.
Yeah.
Um, we talk about the pandemic. Of course, it affected pretty much everyone, including uh, journalism outlets, media, and of course companies, including for sure the auto industry.
Hmm.
Um, you were yourself forced to stay home for a while. I think we talked about on Twitter about this a few weeks back. How did it go?
It's weird. I feel like there's like very distinct stages in kind of the lockdown. In the beginning, it was all very new, and there's like some novelty to it. I usually start work at 8, and I could suddenly get up at quarter to 8 and be at work at 8.
Hmm.
Work from my living room at my laptop, and that was nice. And having access to my kitchen at all times to make lunch or have a snack or something. And then later on, you kind of start feeling your walls closing in on you. Um, it gets a little tougher to be home all the time.
Hmm.
But in Europe, we've also since then, starting middle end of May and now in June, opening up a little bit. So you can meet with some people outside. The stores are open. You have to wear a mask when you go into them, and you can meet with up to 10 people. That's basically the social circle you can have.
Hmm.
And I'm lucky. I live in a nice neighborhood. I'm right by a river here with some really nice grass. You can go out and just hang out with some friends. Have a beer, read a book, whatever. So it's gotten a lot easier now that the weather's nice. But on the work side, it's weird because you're very disconnected from your coworkers. Now,
Hmm.
the Munich office is pretty small. We're only 4 journalists in the office, and then other non-journalism people. So most of the people I report to, most of the people in my team, they were never in Munich. They were always I always interacted with them through the phone or through my
Hmm.
computer. So that hasn't changed. But that kind of daily banter that you get to have with your colleagues beside you, that does go away, and that is a little strange when you're just
Hmm.
sitting in silence or with a podcast on in the background.
Yeah, I completely understand. Um, so life is, I mean, I don't want to say pretty much back to normal because this is not true, but slowly going back to a kind of normal way to live, basically.
It's getting there. Yeah. It's I've gotten pretty used to being at home. It's nice to kind of have the time to do what I need to do and know that I can step away to put a load of laundry in or something. um, and life, yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky. There's been so many reports of layoffs in journalism and
Hmm.
people getting furloughed and everything like that, and I haven't been affected by that. And honestly, I count my blessings every day that that's the situation I'm in.
Went online and checked your Well, basically the list of articles you publish for Bloomberg. And I think yesterday was the first time you published since the end of May. And
So
do you
you're
feel...
only seeing the web stories,
Oh, I
which
see.
is
Okay.
a lot of the stories only get published to our internal wire.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's true. Okay.
So I publish on average about 600 stories a year.
Wow.
And maybe 1 in 5, 1 in 10 go to the web. It's only the big stories. So I know that people will look on the website and say, wow, he hasn't worked in 2 weeks. But it's just I've been writing a lot of small stuff that sometimes we don't put on the website.
Well, that wasn't what I was trying to say, but I was trying to say that the industry is coming. I mean, I wanted to talk about the auto industry itself, because it's, as we said, you cover BMW, but you also cover other topics related to the auto industry, for example. And it seems like, even if it's bad news-ish, it seems like the industry itself is once again coming slowly back to life. As an observer, as a journalist in that field, do you have any predictions, for example, about the state of the auto industry for the coming years? Do you think that it's going to be, because as you wrote yesterday, it seems to, even if all the numbers are down, basically, it seems to be, they seem to be less down than they were, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've learned through the last 4 years to never predict anything, because my predictions are so very wrong. And I think the last 4 years have shown us anything. It's you can't predict anything in these times. None of us couldn't see any of this coming. So I'm very careful about that. But what I will say is, this is, and I hate to use the word unprecedented because I think it's overused, but this is really an unprecedented time for the automotive industry. They've never dealt with anything like this before. I mean, you look at the financial crisis, they had like 13 months of sales drops, but it was never this bad. They never had complete shutdowns. They never had to close all their factories and have every dealership suddenly close. And I don't think anybody can really predict the long-term effects of that. Now, you're right. There is a little bit of a recovery. In May, the European new car registrations were only down 50-something%. But in any other time, that would be still a disaster.
Yeah.
We're just looking at the trend line and saying it's going slightly up. In my case, so I cover BMW. They're a little safer than others. They have some good liquidity. They have 2 billionaire owners, and they have just a little bit more of a buffer that they could probably survive for a little bit longer. Other automakers, don't have that. They've had to go to governments for help or similar measures. There will be consequences from this pandemic. It will change things. I think the most obvious one is research and development has been put on hold in a lot of places. The budgets have been frozen or slashed, which means new electric cars, things like that. Any new developments in autonomous driving, those might happen later now. At the same time, there are always opportunities for others to come in. Not everybody is hurting at the same level as everybody else, and there's always startups or other companies that might look at these gaps and they might come in and say, "Hey, this is our chance to compete one more time." So I think, if anything, this is going to create kind of mix everything up, and maybe we'll see some new players emerge from this.
And you've talked a little bit about it before, about your work, about the way the pandemic changed your daily routine, for example. But do you feel, beside being able to do a load of laundry during the workday, do you feel that this pandemic and the recovery is gonna change the way you do journalism or the topics you cover?
I think it's changed the way I see my job. I've realized how productive I can be even when I'm working from home. I've realized that not everything I do is tied to my office, and I think it's totally fine to be working from home. I haven't thought about what's going to happen after this, whether I'll keep wanting to work from home or what kind of routine I'll settle into. But it's definitely opened my eyes to that. And when it comes to journalism, nothing really beats that face-to-face meeting with a source, that personal relationship that you can build, and you can always call them or have video chats. But it's like with any other friendships you have, it's a stopover. And I think those things will never quite be replaced like that. But there's a lot of other things that totally work remotely. I can do my job from pretty much anywhere with my laptop and a phone and a notebook, and that's really, and I've really realized that, and I think that will maybe make me braver to go out and work from different places or seek out different places to find news, basically.
Oliver Sachgau, journalist for Bloomberg in Munich, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
And for everybody else that is listening right now, thank you for being there also. You can catch all our previous episodes on pieuvre.ca. We're also on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. See you next time.